Everybody, good afternoon. If you're in the right place, we are here today to talk about keys to success on the academic clinician track. My name is Meryl Cohen. I'm the Associate Dean for Faculty Development here at Penn. I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Jim Callahan, who will be giving the presentation. And Jim and I have known each other 30 years, Jim?
Long time.
I believe it's that long. And Jim has.
Because we went to kindergarten together.
That's right. He wears many hats here. He's in the Division of Emergency Medicine here at CHOP. He's the medical director for global pediatric education at CHOP. He's a professor of clinical peds and the chair of the co-op for the ACC, which is the academic clinician track. And he's going to be talking to you about the keys to success for promotion. We'll have a short presentation by Jim, and then please put some questions in the chat that you have about the promotion process. And we want this to be as informal as possible. And we're happy to answer any questions you might have. So Jim, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Meryl. And thanks everybody for joining today. I'm going to try to share my screen and see if that works. Where did it go?
Jim, I'm happy to do it if you want me to.
Can you guys see that?
No.
No. Okay. If you want to share, that'd be great.
Sure.
Sorry about that. So there are a lot of slides and there's a lot of material in the slides, but I really think that question and answers are better. So certainly if you're want to interrupt as we go along, that's great. Or put questions in the chat. That would be fine too. And then we'll try to zip through them and hit the highlights. We will send these out afterwards as a PDF so people can have access to this, but everything that's here is on the Office of Academic Affairs website. I think that's the other thing. That's a real source of truth that people should get used to using. So we can go to the next slide. So I was going to talk about the track a little bit, just think about promotion timeline and then kind of what we talk about as far as promotion, because I think promotion is what many of us see as success, although I don't think that's the only thing we should grade our success on. And then really where to get help and guidance. Things like today are a good place to do that, but other sources that you have as well. Next slide. And next slide. So the track has been around since the mid 200s, like 203 or 205, something like that. And it was really brought up and brought into being as a place, an academic home for people where the real emphasis is on clinical care and education, with quality and safety being rolled into that clinical care, and then leadership roles and those things. And there are some links there to the OAA website. Next slide. Usually when people start out, they're doing about 90% of their time clinically on this track, although as you develop leadership roles or administrative roles or other things, be it in education or in clinical care or things like that, that gets adjusted. Next slide. And we are the largest track in the School of Medicine, so we kind of dwarf the other tracks at this point, even though we're the newest and the youngest track in many ways. And I think one of the things that's really important to emphasize is we are a really young track. When you look, most of our faculty, more than half of our faculty are the assistant professor level. So there is oftentimes need for mentoring and things like that. So please, I think the worst thing to do is to sit around and worry and fret. So reach out to your experts in your own department or at the School of Medicine, or certainly people can email me anytime. I'm more than glad to help people with feedback and things like that. And then there is a committee of the co-op called the Co-op ACC, which stands for Academic Clinician and Clinical Tracks. There's 32 of us on it this year, and we are all great sources of information, and people are more than willing to help people out. Next slide. So, I think strategies for success. I think the strategies for success on this track are like they are in most other areas of academic medicine. And I will say that I have known Meryl for at least 30 years, and we didn't meet in kindergarten. So I've been around a really long time. And so I think you learn over time. And so, I think one of the biggest things is know your role, what's expected of you, right? As a full-time faculty member, you have an academic plan, and that describes what you're supposed to do. And at least when you get reappointed in your first, as an assistant professor every 3 years, that gets reviewed with you and looked at again. So make sure you understand what's in there. I think identifying mentors who are really going to help you, who know your personal goals and are passionate about what your expectations are, but also Penn's expectations. And then really be an engaged mentee. Mentorship relationships are really driven by mentees, I think, more than mentors. And we often have a mentorship team around us. Being organized, which as an ER physician is never my strong suit, right? I have some ADD in me, or else I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. Find your passion clinically in teaching. And then I think being a good citizen really helps, right? You volunteer for things, you follow through, and you do a good job. You find things that you really love. Next slide. And so similar to, kind of overall things, it's, kind of goals around being clinically successful, which you need to be on this track. I think, finding joy in your work. We have the privilege of taking care of wonderful families and patients every day. And recognizing that is a privilege, and liking what you do is really important. Next slide. And then in teaching, kind of the same thing. I think, be enthusiastic about what you teach. When you have something you're excited about, find ways to share that. And I think look for feedback. So TED, right, is the teaching evaluation database. Look at your data, learn from it. When there's something in there that upsets you, reach out to one of your mentors and kind of think about, how do I incorporate that into becoming a better teacher and stuff like that. So next slide. So just really quickly, the promotion timeline. So on this track, when you first get appointed as an assistant professor, you're reappointed every 3 years. And then after your second reappointment, so at the beginning of year 7, you can start the process. And that process for promotion usually takes about a year to a year and a half, sometimes as long as 2 years. It's really getting all the materials back. When you request letters of reference or request clinical performance evaluations from your peers, that's where that's coming back from and why it takes the time. Next slide. And then the things that we look at for promotion are really very well laid out on the OAA website. There's this kind of grab and go PDF that you can look at that has all the requirements there. Next slide. And you really have to show excellence in clinical care, excellence in teaching, excellence in your selected area of concentration, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And then sustained professionalism, which is the same across all of our tracks. And then your dossier comes to the co-op ACC, and that's the only committee that votes on you at the School of Medicine level. So we present our findings and our votes to the broader co-op. The broader committee on appointments and promotions is what co-op stands for. But the decision is really made by your peers. So there's 32 AC faculty on that committee. They're the people that vote. People in your own department can't vote on you, but that's who decides whether the recommendation is to get promoted or not. That then goes to the dean, who brings it to the provost, and then the provost, ultimately decides yes or no. Although I will say that I've been the chair of the committee, I think since 2015 or something like that, and was on it for many years before that. And we've never had one of our decisions overridden by the provost. Next slide. So just kind of more things that you're looking at. When do I go to, if there are associate professors here, usually it's about after 5 years, but there's no requirement to go through a reappointment. When you meet the criteria, it's really time to go. And by the time you're getting promoted to professor, you should have a kind of a reputation, both clinically, teaching, if education is your area of concentration, but then in your area of concentration that extends out beyond where you normally practice. So kind of at a regional level or maybe even a national level. The next 2 slides, which we can go through quickly, are just about professionalism. Remember, there's a professionalism statement from the School of Medicine, which is there. And then the next slide is about, kind of the RISE mnemonic around professionalism, right? Respect, integrity, self-care, and etiquette, and all of those sorts of things are there. And so that has to be looked at if you're, in a period of remediation around professionalism concerns, you would not be able to be promoted at that time. But if you've been remediated, you've had a period of remediation, things are going well now, then, people don't hold that against you forever. So we all have little bumps in our career trajectories and stuff, and you can recover from things like that. Next slide. So clinical evidence of excellence. So there is a minimum of 20% clinical effort. This is a clinical track. And so if you're really below 20% clinical effort, this probably isn't the best track for you. And hopefully people get put on the right track when they get appointed, but it doesn't always work, and you may need to move on afterwards and things like that into a different track or something like that. There is something called the clinical performance evaluation, which are really peer references from people that you work with. They don't need to be at your rank or higher. It could be assistant professors. It could be full professors. It could be people in your department or people that you work with. I'm an emergency physician at CHOP. So when I went through this process, I used some of my general surgery colleagues who I meet over over patients in the trauma bay, or, when I'm worried about appendicitis, intensivists, hospitalists, referring physicians. So this is physicians, but they're going to talk about your clinical expertise. Next slide. And these are the things they're asked about. So they're asked about your medical knowledge, your communication with other professionals, how you treat patients, your dedication, enthusiasm, get back to that thing that, you're doing things you like to do, your professionalism, and then an overall clinical performance. And that's one of the things that comes collated responses to that comes to the committee. Next slide. And then there's lots of other ways to show excellence, right? You're the leader of the quality committee for your department, or you're the leader of, you've worked in leadership roles in your subspecialty organization or something that shows you have a clinical expertise. And so, there are other ways that we look at clinical excellence. Next slide. And then teaching excellence really means that you're going to show high quality engagement and impact in at least one or two of these areas. So teaching, learner assessment, curriculum and course development, mentoring and advising, educational leadership and administration, or educational scholarship. On the AC track, we all teach, right? So teaching is going to be one of our areas, whether it's clinical teaching, where you're giving lectures or doing small group things. But you may have other things there. And if your area of concentration is med ed, you probably have several of these checked off. Next slide. So again, there's lots of examples in here. Remember, you have to have 100 credits of teaching effort each year on this track as you do the other full-time tracks. Next slide. And we're really talking about impact. So the direct effect of things that you do on your learners as far as education goes, and then trajectory, that you're getting more advanced in what you're teaching and how you're teaching and who you're having impact on over the course of your career. Next slide. And then there's lots of ways we measure impact in teaching and things like that. So again, invited lectures around disseminating knowledge around education specifically, as opposed to clinical things. Maybe you're a program director or associate program director, you're a course director at the school, things like that. Next slide. And then, you should have at least kind of a primary teaching domain out of those 6 things, 6 areas. But, at professor, you really have to show real excellence and a reputation in that area. So somebody had a question, it looked like, in the chat. Can you comment on the timeline when people join Penn after having similar institutions? So, that's a great question, Joe. And so we tend to give people credit for time they did someplace else, or if they were on another track, right? If you were CE and the focus of your career changed, or even if you were a clinical track faculty, if you were really acting like an AC faculty member, either here or someplace else, we give people credit for that. It wouldn't really behoove us as an institution to go out there recruiting people from other places and then say, we're going to make you start at square one and wait a full 7 years. So that would really be counterintuitive and counterproductive. So we do give credit for that. Next
I would
slide.
just add that if you're a faculty member like that, who's coming from another institution, that you contact your educational officer of your department so that you can discuss the timeline and advance your timeline to get promoted earlier, because clearly you would be promoted earlier because you've already done the time.
Correct. Excellent. Next slide. And then, so I think that just like in clinical care, there's going to be lots of other ways to show things other than just teaching scores. I think we were very focused on teaching scores here. We're not focused on them. They're important, but there are lots of ways that we show, that we're good teachers, good educators in other ways. Next slide. And just some other ways there as well. And certainly if you're getting awards for teaching, either from the residency program that you teach in, from medical students, from your local organizations, from your department, those are things that are important. Next slide. So, it is important though to know what your teaching scores are, whether you use TED or Blue in your department or things like that. And currently the evaluations, which are going to undergo some tweaking probably, 2 meets expectations. But if you have scores less than or equal to 3, really your education officer should be reaching out to you and helping think about that and things as well. And how do I improve my teaching and stuff in any domain? And there used to be a minimum score for promotion, a minimum score of greater than 3 in all domains to go promoted to associate professor, minimum of greater than 25th percentile in all domains to be promoted to professor. Those were taken away because we realized that the teaching scores are not necessarily objective. There is one department that teaches in multiple settings, multiple clinical settings, and their evaluations are much lower where they're teaching in one session, the exact same person when they're teaching in a different setting. So we know that other things go into this. So we're not going to, use these as the bedrock so much. But boy, if you've got low scores, your education officer, your DCOOP, your departmental committee on appointments and promotions, others have to put those into some contextualized form so we understand why it is that your scores might be on the lower side and stuff. But we're not going to hold people up just because of low scores. Next slide.
Just to emphasize, Jim, that people who do have consistently low scores, that there are resources available to help your teaching, including some coaching opportunities, some stuff that's on the OAA website that you can look at. So, if this is a consistent issue for you, then that we definitely want to provide you with the help to make you a better educator. So just know that there's materials out there for that.
Yeah, I think the OAA website has become the best resource for people over the last 5 years or so. It's really been updated. It has the better search function than anything at Penn or CHOP. You can put things in there and you find exactly what you're looking for very quickly. And there are lots of resources, right? There are all these things that I'm showing you today about, kind of the nitty gritty, the mechanistic stuff. But there are lots of great resources. And then I would look there's lots of great programs. There's programs through Focus, there's programs through Advance, the teaching impact work through the OAA as well. There was a great seminar about the joy of learning, the joy of teaching in January. There's all about how to, teach with a lens around equity and inclusion, things like that. So make use of those. Those are really important and helpful. Next slide. Oh, so the education portfolio is this new thing. So you put in 2 things and your education officer puts in 2 things. So you put in your workbook, which is an Excel spreadsheet showing that you've got those 100 credits. And then you put in your education impact statement. And this was really when we talked about de-emphasizing, if you will, or not using scores only, we really wanted people to be able to show a holistic view of their impact in teaching. And that's where we came up with this education portfolio, much like many of our peer institutions have done over the last many years as well. So it no longer is called the education database. The education portfolio, a draft of it actually goes to your departmental co-op. And education officers who know you and know your teaching should be involved in your departmental co-ops at this point as well. Next slide. So again, education workbook and education impact statement, next slide, come from you. And then the education officer puts in a report that describes your engagement, your impact, and your summary statement. And then any internal teaching data, so the scores that we were just talking about, do still come. And so that's the education portfolio that comes to the committee to be looked at. Next slide. And so that education impact statement, there are 5 major education categories of engagement and focus from the AAMC. So that's teaching, learner assessment, curriculum and course development, mentoring, advising, and education service and leadership. Here at Penn and at CHOP and at our other affiliated institutions, lots of people are doing education scholarship. So the ad hoc committee that put this together added that as a 6th category. Next slide. And this is what it looks like. This comes from the OIA website. You check off which of those areas you're engaged in. Again, if education is your area of concentration, it might be many of those. If you're really, your area of concentration is you're the Sjogren's expert in rheumatology at Penn, maybe it's just teaching. You do direct teaching with rheumatology fellows, with medicine residents, with medical students. And that's really, your area of engagement. It's okay to have one. Most people usually have 2. You might be involved in educational scholarship with people, or you might be doing a lot of mentoring for fellows or something like that, and you're having impact there as well. And then the second part of it is reflection on feedback. This really should be including all of this at the top. Those kind of chart parts of it should take 2 pages at the most, 3 pages. If education is your area of focus, your area of concentration, some people it does take a little longer. Some people have been as long as 4 or 5. We're never going to send it back because it's too long, but it's not busy work. You don't need to fill this with reams of information. You really just need to reflect on your education impact and then how you reflected on feedback over time and grew as well. Next slide. And then there's just so you can see what the education officer report looks like. That's usually about 2 to 3 pages total once you fill things in as well. Next slide. So area of concentration is things that people really kind of worry about. Well, what does that mean? What am I supposed to do? So it really means that you have an area of depth and focus. And this was really developed so that departments and divisions would have an incentive to work with you and help you develop an area of focus and an area of expertise. They can be clinical or non-clinical. So it might be that you're an expert in very early onset inflammatory bowel disease in pediatrics if you're a pediatric GI specialist. It might be that you're an airway expert if you're a pulmonologist or an ENT person or things like that. Or it might be non-clinical. So it might be medical education, community service, advocacy, quality and safety, which obviously aligns with clinical, but health policy, global health, diversity and inclusion, all sorts of things. And by the time you go for your 2nd reappointment as an assistant professor, you have to declare this. And then it's needed for promotion, both at associate and full professors. And then we look at excellence really in the local level. You're the local expert in that at the associate level, or kind of a broader impact than that at the professor level. Next slide. And I would say, find something that really gets you excited, that it complements your teaching and your clinical efforts. Again, it can be clinical or non-clinical. Hopefully you're discussing this with your mentors, department or divisional leadership. Somehow it should fit in to kind of department and divisional goals, right? If you're doing something that's totally different, nobody else is doing it, it's not contributing to things, that may not do the best. But then find ways to get involved, volunteer, do a good job, start accepting leadership roles, and that will really come. Next slide. And then I just listed some ways that you kind of demonstrate your excellence and stuff. Next slide. And then excellence in your area of concentration, again, professor level, a little bit more impact, a little bit more upward trajectory. And next slide. And then I have 2 slides that are just full of different areas of concentration that people have looked at or used over the last couple of years as they've come up for promotion. You can go to the next slide too, Susan and Lucy. And the next slide. And then you still get to fill out a personal statement. And I think this is your place to tell your story. Talk about your trajectory. Get somebody to help you with it, right? None of us are great at bragging about ourselves, so your mentors can help you. Might be people in your academic affairs group that help with writing or things like that. Again, it's brief. It's usually 1 to 2 pages. And this is going to ask you about your area of concentration. If your area of concentration is education, you can just say, see my education impact statement. Again, we're not trying to find busy work. We're trying to give people the chance to tell their story. Next slide. And there is the personal statement. Next slide. And then the last thing we ask, and this is a reason why you want to network in your area of concentration, why you want to seek out referrals and things like that, is we do ask for peer references. At promotion to professor, at least 3 have to be outside your primary practice site. So from another department or for someplace else in the health system, or preferably even from another medical school. They have to be at the rank that you're being promoted to or above. And you identify these with your departmental leadership, and they get submitted to the office. And the letters go out from the office. They don't come out from you. And then these are confidential and not shared with the candidate when we get them back. It's an electronic response form. Next slide. I'm almost done with the slides. So when you go up for promotion, there's a chair's recommendation letter. Those clinical evaluations, which are peer evaluations of people that are working with you clinically, other physicians, peer references. So these are the references we just talked about. Next slide. Your academic plan, which I referenced before, your CV and feds, your personal statement, and then that educational portfolio that has your activities workbook and your education impact statement from you, your education officer report and evaluation data from the department. Next slide. And so where do I get more information, right? So certainly your mentors, division and departmental leadership, looking to senior AC faculty in your own division or department, departmental academic affairs staff or faculty affairs staff oftentimes have a wealth of information, a wealth of knowledge. Your education officer, you should know who that is. You can find that on the OAA website. You put in education officers, it'll give you a list of everybody by department. The co-op ACC members, which I've talked about, and then using the School of Medicine resources. Next slide. And so there are the 32 of us that are on the committee this year, and Lauren and Jane from the Office of Academic Affairs who support us. Next slide. And then there's the website. There's a whole tab of the website devoted to the academic clinician track. There's lots of other things on there. There's stuff about wellness. There's stuff about trying to learn better teaching techniques, as Meryl has talked about. Learning ops and initiatives, all is right there. And then final slides. Next slide. So I think this is a great track for gifted clinicians and teachers who really are making clinical care and education the focus of our careers. I think it recognizes the breadth of skills and variety of talents that exists here. There's a lot of flexibility for career development over time. And it allows an academically focused careers for people that concentrate on teaching and education. And we've talked about how we judge if people are ready for promotion. And there's no mandatory time limit. So if you've got colleagues that are on the CE or the tenure track, right, where they have that mandatory, they have to get promoted within 10 years. Here, you could be an assistant professor for life and could be here 30 years. Most people that work at places like Penn and CHOP don't want to be assistant professors for life, and we wouldn't want that for you, right? We want you to succeed and be happy in what you're doing and have a fruitful career. So most people do go on and get promoted and things like that. So we can take down the slides. Again, we'll send those out as a PDF. So there's lots of information in there, and we can start talking about some of the questions, and people can ask other questions as well.
Thanks, Jim. We'll get to the questions in a second. I also wanted to let people know about our podcast series that just came out about a month ago, which is on the OAA website, and it's called Thriving at PSOM. And there are 2 podcasts about the AC track that Jim and I discuss in detail, very similar to what we're talking about here. There's also one on the educational impact statement and what educational contributions you can make, and one on personal statements. So there's a wealth of information in those podcasts, which you can listen to on your own at any time.
Please go to them, because I'm waiting for my royalty check from Meryl for them.
That's right. And now they're on Apple and Spotify too. So pretty cool. All right. One question that came up, Jim, is what is the ideal deadline for submitting your dossier and materials for promotion? Is it right after the 5 years at associate, but before the next co-op meeting? And how often do you meet for AC track?
So Roseanne, this seems like kind of geared towards the professor rank. And so I think your department, your division chief, and you have to decide when you're ready. And then it goes through your departmental co-op first, right? So each year at the beginning of the academic year, departments submit to the school kind of a list of people who are going to be up for promotion that year at kind of across all ranks and across all tracks. So your dossier first goes to your departmental co-op. There is a vote there. When you go back, when you get the slides, if you look at that timeline, you can see it goes to departmental co-op first, then it comes to us, and then it goes on to the provost and things like that. So it's really talking with people there. And I think at the professor level, because you don't have to go through a reappointment, if you're a national leader in your field and you're getting all sorts of accolades and you're making great impact, or you're a regional leader, then your department may decide, and you may decide, or you may advocate for yourself. Your mentors can help advocate that, I think I'm ready for promotion, and people may give you feedback that maybe not. But when you're ready, when it's ready to go, then it just goes up. It doesn't necessarily, there's no real set timeline there. But again, it goes to your departmental co-op first, who votes on you, and then things get moved on to us. So I don't know I hope that answers that question.
Great. So first of all, Stephanie put the links for the podcasts in the chat. So, please feel free to use those links. The other question that was on the chat, Jim, is does education of other clinicians count towards education? For example, CME for NCCN conferences, et cetera.
Yeah, so I think that's an important part of our teaching, and we certainly do look at that as, if you have evaluations from that certainly can bolster, and you have to keep those yourself, right? With the number of faculty members departments have, they can't keep a catalog of that. So what I do when I go someplace and give a talk, I say, I'll give a talk if you'll give me an evaluation, because I want to get better. And then I take the PDF of that evaluation and I throw it in a folder on my desktop. And then when it's time to submit things for anything, I've got all of those there. Now, teaching of other clinicians is certainly counts in that way, but it doesn't count. Teaching of peers does not count towards your 100 teaching credits, with an exception. So it used to be that you only could teach trainees or students to count to that. We realized that a lot of us teach advanced practice providers, be they PAs or nurse practitioners, all the time. And that's a very important role in an academic medical center. So up to 50% of your 100 credits each year, your minimum, can actually be towards teaching towards those kind of learners. Not clinical teaching or clinical supervision of those, because of the way funds flow to work. But if you're giving small group things, you're doing simulations with advanced practice providers, things like that, that doesn't count. Now, if you're invited to go give grand rounds someplace else, again, those teaching things we would use to look at your excellence as a teacher. It's not going to count to your 100 credits of teaching, but an invited talk to go give grand rounds someplace else says you've got at least a regional reputation in your area of concentration, be that clinical or something else that you're being asked to go talk about. So counts is a funny word, right? We count things in a lot of different ways, but that's a really important part of recognition for people that are, thinking about advancement in this area and stuff like that.
So a follow-up question to that is, does teaching with instructors count in the 100 credits?
Depends on what kind of teaching you're doing, right?
Yeah.
If you're instructors and you're teaching a research methods course to instructors who are part of a certificate program or even a research program, research methods program in your thing, then yes, that would count. But instructors on bylines grants. Yeah, Peter, I'm not. Yeah, so clinical supervision of them is not quite the same. So that really would not be the same, right? But they're more pure like there. But if you're teaching in courses that they're involved in, yes, that would count. Just
to emphasize that people get all worked up about the 100 credits. It's actually very easy to get to 100 credits. So I don't want people to fixate on that, because if you are, engaged in clinical activities, if you have a student or a resident with you in clinic for 4 or 5 hour session, these count for multiple hours of your credits. It's not one credit. So you can really easily in a year get to 100 credits. And I can tell you from, sitting on COAP and listening to Jim do his presentations, we never have a situation where we say this person has not been teaching enough or doesn't have enough credits.
Yeah.
It's just it's not a problem. So, there's multiple ways you can add it all up. If you mentor somebody through, a clinical activity or a research paper or anything like that. If you are acting as a mentor to somebody in your program, and you meet on a consistent basis, all of those things count.
Yeah, and I will say that I was on the ad hoc committee probably almost 10 years ago now that redefined teaching, and we've continued to expand it. And the charge at that point from the dean was, there's so much teaching that goes on here, nobody's getting enough credit. So let's find all the teaching that people do and give people credit for that. So as Meryl said, now if you're teaching even high school students in one of the summer programs, that counts, right? If you do one afternoon in an outpatient clinic and you've got one student or one trainee with you, that's that's a credit for 4 hours. If you're doing a whole day, that's 2 credits.
Right.
If you have a student or a trainee that does an abstract with you and it gets submitted, that's 5 credits. For every lecture you give, you get 4 credits. Even if you give it over again, you get 4 credits the next time too. So, it's interesting when we look at the number of credits, most people are in the 200 to 300 to 400 range, some even higher than that. It's very rare we see somebody who's a full-time faculty member that isn't making, doing at least 100 credits. I think where it's challenging sometimes is if you're working in a satellite, you're a CHOP GI doctor who's only working at Princeton, or you're a anesthesiologist that's on the AC track because you have some sort of educational role, but you're working now out at Chester County or something like that. That can be difficult, but then, that comes back to your mentors, your department finding ways, right? If you lecture 5 times a year, you've suddenly got 20 credits right off the bat and things like that. So, and your role as a community practitioner is very important to our trainees and students in talking about that. So there are ways to do all of that, getting involved in a course at the medical school and stuff like that as well.
Right. There's another question here. Is there a way you recommend to evaluate your progress in the academic track? Be good to know about potential areas for improvement before formal evaluation for reappointment. Do you recommend to meet with your educational officer regularly?
So I think each department, each division is probably a little bit different. I think your mentors, as a mentee, I think one of the things you should be sharing with your mentors are feedback you're getting about your teaching, right? So your TED report, which comes out in January and July every year, when you're meeting with your mentors, your leadership, they share that, right? Because they may have insights into what you're seeing there. It's difficult to meet with an education officer in some departments because the size of, right, there's one education officer for the Department of Medicine. There's 600 faculty. There's one, we're soon to have an associate education officer in pediatrics who will work with me on an ongoing basis, but we have almost 500 faculty. So it's difficult to meet with everybody on a regular basis. But if you ever have questions or concerns, that's what the education officer is there for. And they're really glad to help you out and stuff as well. Thinking about your mentors, who is helping you, you're oftentimes the education leaders in your division or department, so your fellowship director, residency directors, things like that. They have a good sense of how you're doing and stuff. So looking to them for feedback as well.
Also in your annual meeting with your APR, right. Like your annual
APR,
meeting with your
right.
division
Teaching should
chief.
be part of.
Yeah, and they should be helping you understand what your progress is. For example, in addition to the education emphasis, there should be a clinical niche, right? So when you're first starting, you may not have a clinical niche, but as you progress in your assistant professorship, the idea would be like that you could find an area within your division that has a need and provide a clinical niche in that area. And that can be, a subspecialty within your field. It could be expertise in providing quality improvement resources. It can be in a variety of areas. So, you know, and you should be working within your division to figure out what that niche is going to be. There is another question. I had asked Lisa to put together some guidance on the educational workbook. Have you heard
So-
any research? Yeah,
So
they're on the
there is a
website.
document, and I don't have it in this presentation, but there is a document that explains teaching. It's on the OAA website, and I will try to see if I can actually pull up the link and put it in the chat. But it breaks down each of those categories, what counts and what doesn't, I think very well, actually, and
Yeah.
it continues to get expanded as well. I think the other thing that, you know, co-op does ad hoc things every couple of years to make sure. And one of the things that we talked about was teaching in the community. Certainly, you know, around the time of the pandemic and certainly kind of the awakening around inequity issues and things like that. There you go. I think somebody beat me to it. Was that Stephanie?
Arboretta just put it up.
Arboretta and Stephanie.
Thank you.
Both. Thank you so much. So, you know, I think we realized that teaching in the community is a really important role for an academic medical center. So if you're teaching to community groups, that counts, right? So you go and you give a talk at a church basement, or, you know, at a synagogue, or to a local group, PTO or something like that. You're representing Penn, you're representing CHOP, you're speaking in a professional way, not that you're there complaining about, you know, the teaching in your child's school or something like that. Right, that counts. So you just have to document that you did it. So I think there's lots of ways to do that. But the kind of the teaching expectations and credits are there. So that's great.
Yeah. There's no more questions on the chat, but if anybody wants to just ask a question, please feel free to do so. There's only 35 of us on here, so it should be easy.
Just a follow-up question. So does the department co-op just meet once a year? Like if you
Oh,
miss
no,
that
I'm
cutoff?
sorry.
Monthly.
Yeah, I'm
You meet
sorry,
monthly.
Roseanne. That
You
was
meet
part of your
monthly.
question. Most departmental co-ops meet monthly.
Yeah.
In pediatrics, where we have such a volume of people, we actually meet twice a month from January to May, and maybe even in December. And then the co-op ACC, so we take the summer off because the provost that does the committee at the provost level that does the ultimate decision doesn't meet in the summer. So we usually start our meetings, we take the summer off, but we start our meetings around the 20th or the 25th of August. And our last meeting of the academic year this year will be the 27th of June. We go every 2 weeks all year long. And then the co-op for the School of Medicine is the same way. So
Every 2
also
weeks. Every 2 weeks, same schedule. Every 2 weeks we meet to go over everyone's dossiers. So you get through the cycle. We don't want to hold you up in that. That part should not ever hold you up from the promotion process.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to reassure people, there may be people here that are waiting to hear back. If you haven't heard anything, that's usually a good sign. If there's a bump in the road, you're going to hear about it from your own departmental co-op. You're going to hear about it from the school saying, we need more information, we need something. But when you think about it, you know, this year, the co-op ACC, just for the AC track, will probably act on over 200 senior level appointments and promotions. We were in the 180 range last year, and we've certainly been much busier this year as that young group of faculty starts to mature through. And it's all about when things come in and when you kind of queue up. So you and your, you know, office mate or the person you work with may submit your dossiers, your stuff at the same time. You may even get approved at the departmental co-op in the same meeting. But then it's kind of how things come back in. And once your dossier is complete, so you have enough peer references, you have enough people that have commented on the clinical evaluation summary. So when those come back, then you can start moving forward in the process. So if they all come back really quick in September, when there's not a lot in the queue, you may hear within a few weeks. But if they don't all come back until December or January, it may take a couple of months to hear back. And it's not about, oh, this person had a better dossier, or they're more qualified, or they're a better assistant professor, and therefore we're going to promote them sooner. It's really all about the queuing. And the Office of Academic Affairs, Arboretta Bowles, who's the director, and and the AC side, Lauren No and Jane Waltman, people work incredibly hard there. And so it's not that anybody's, there's nothing slow in the process. There's just a lot of process for a lot of people. So it does take time to get through. Everybody gets through. We don't miss anybody. So I think that be reassured. If you haven't heard anything, even from this year, and you're thinking, I think I'm supposed to be promoted July 1st and I haven't heard anything, there's still people I think we still have about 35 more dossiers to go through just in our committee. So.
All right, any other questions?
And I think the biggest thing is when you have questions, to be sitting at home or sitting in your office after you've had a long day stewing is the worst thing, because then you start to make all sorts of develop all sorts of stories in your mind why this isn't going well. So reach out if you're not sure, if you don't have resources in your department, you don't know who to talk to. I talk to people at least a couple times a week from other departments, and usually several times a week from people within pediatrics, as kind of the EO for pediatrics as well. So, and your EOs are a great source of information, especially for this track, your departmental co-op chairs, right? So there's lots of people you can talk to, and you shouldn't ever be sitting there worrying, because that's anxiety isn't going to help you do well in anything. So, just think about who can I reach out to, ask the question. People are more than willing to help. The OAA group is outstanding as well. So,
yeah. So know about, the OAA website has a wealth of information. It's really an outstanding website. And then, know that you can access the podcasts really easily and listen to them on your own time. Many of them are pertinent to the AC track. So, and we are always available to you if you have any other questions, and you have access to our email. So I think that wraps it up.
I
Lucy,
just wanted
anything
to
else?
say that Focus wants to thank you both for doing it, and also for being so incredibly accessible, because I really want to second what Jim said about please reach out to people. If you want CME for this session, the slide will come up about what you have to do next to get it. And thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Lucy. And thanks, Jim.
thanks everybody. Thanks, Meryl.
Have a good day.
Okay, have a good
Bye,
day. everyone.
everyone.
Jim, thank you again. That was
Thanks,
terrific.
Lucy.
Yeah, I
Thanks,
hope people
Susan.
will read